I love the Tak and the Power of Juju trilogy. I already hammered my love for the trilogy in a 1-hour retrospective, which you can totally check out right here, but to summarize, the Tak and the Power of Juju trilogy is some of my favorite trilogy of games out there. While I think no game is a masterpiece, except for the second one, I can't help but love them for how emblematic they are of their time. It was a time when developers were experimenting with the technology to create something fun, which while it made several games people love today, it also led to a lot of fun games that not a lot of people talk about, some of which I've already covered on this channel. The gameplay is fun, the music is stellar, the characters are all charming and likable, and it gives off a strong sense of childlike warmth that not a lot of games from my childhood ever give off, with the only exceptions being Super Mario Sunshine and Wizard 101. I don't think there will ever be another game like Tak, at least in terms of soul. Call it nostalgia all you want, but okay, it's nostalgia, I will confess. Regardless, the Tak and the Power of Juju trilogy is one of my favorite gaming trilogies of all time, and I will stand on that point until I die. So let's talk about the show. No, I don't want to talk about the show. It's so bad. So let's talk about this game instead. Yeah, I kinda feared this would come. Tak and the Guardians of Gross is a 3D action-adventure platformer released on PS2 and Wii on October 13th, 2008, right around the time the show was airing. THQ was still published, but instead of being developed by Avalanche Software since they were bought out by Disney after Great Juju Challenge was released, this game was instead developed by Blitz Games, who I am no stranger to as they made a handful of licensed games based on properties like Fairly OddParents, SpongeBob SquarePants, Bratz, Burger King, Epic Mickey 2, and Taz Wanted, which I also cover on this channel. Tak and the Guardians of Gross is one of those games where the development is just as interesting as the game itself, and this game, in terms of the Tak series, is rather fascinating, so take that in as we go along. Originally titled Guardians of the Elements, Tak and the Guardians of Gross would have been the definitive fourth installment of the Tak games, incorporating both elements of the games and the show. It would have had Tak facing off against the forces of the elements instead of forces related to garbage, and judging by the screenshots, it would have played just like the games prior with 4 playable characters, including the villainous Tlaylock. Flora and fauna would have also showed up, and Locke would have been able to turn into animals, including a rhino. Unfortunately, this idea was scrapped in favor of what we have now. Honestly, I would have happily preferred this version of Tak 4 over what we have now because the actual Tak 4 is a messy pile of AIDS. As a kid, I hated the Tak TV show because it never really felt like the game. It was like they took all those gross out moments from the games and made that the entire TV show, without even knowing what the point of the games was. The point of the games was about the adventure and not the jokes. So I checked out this game on the Wii as a kid to see if it would give me hope, and I stopped at the middle of the first level. I didn't even bother after. But now that I am an 18-year-old male who's played through the entire trilogy, I am now ready to tackle the Guardians of Gross, the game based on the show that killed the games it was based on. If I was Scott the Woz, then this game right here would be my Chibi Robo Ziplash. Now before I start, I should mention that Tak and the Guardians of Gross plays entirely different compared to the actual trilogy. It's always a good thing to spice up your game while also keeping the core aspect that made your game so special, but this one here is entirely different, so I'll try to judge it as its own thing, but I'll try and still compare it to the games it's based on. And just like the trilogy, I'll be playing it on an emulator, in this case PCS X2 for the PlayStation 2. There are differences between the PS2 and Wii version of this game, like the Wii version has higher quality graphics and the appearance of Locke, but I don't know how to get motion controls running on an emulator, so I'm just gonna stick with the weaker alternative. So the question is Tak and the Guardians of Gross as bad as I vaguely remember, or does it deserve to be flushed down a toilet like the humor it centers itself on? Time to end the console saga, and to celebrate 500 subscribers on this YouTube channel, this is Tak and the Guardians of Gross. So instead of continuing the plot of the games like one would expect, this game exists in the same universe as the terrible TV show, which I can't tell if it's either a prequel, a reset, or an alternate reality, but I'm just gonna roll with what I'm given. So the game opens up with our hero Tak going to clean up a spoiled shrine. His friend Jira asks him for a lift in the Jade Runner, to which he says no and takes a path through the jungle. He makes his way to the shrine and then he has an idea. He attempts to use that giant ass crystal in the middle to hide his mess, but then he breaks it. Little does he realize that the crystal was hiding the 4 big G's, gigantic monster Jujus comprised of Trash Thulu, Slopviathan, Gorgonzilla, and Stinkolossus. Tak returns to Jabolba, who tells him that he needs the help of 4 other Jujus comprised of Icky, Melty, Debris, and Stinky. So with all this set in stone, it's up to Tak to clean up his mess and take down the big G's, all while doing such nasty dares along the way. So Tak and the Guardians of Gross is really a straightforward takedown against a bunch of monsters quest. There's no big twist, none of the characters are interesting, everyone just appears in the game for like 2 scenes and then fuck off, never to be seen again. Tak himself is even uninteresting in this game, but I'll get to him later. The story in this game overall is bland, predictable, and fails to show off more of its new characters, which I would have dismissed if it was a totally different game, but since this is Tak I'm talking about, a game with its very unique charm and whimsical cast of characters, you better damn well try to replicate that game's standards and leave a good first impression. Speaking of first impression, while I'm on the topic, let's move on to the presentation. You know how I mentioned there might never be another game like Tak in terms of how much soul it had? Tak and the Guardians of Gross takes all the things I loved about the trilogy and resurrects it in its own dark, twisted image. While I'm on the topic of things I love about the trilogy, let's talk about the graphics. One of the things I loved about the Tak trilogy was the graphics and the overall atmosphere. You could cut each game's atmosphere with a knife. It's like you could smell the wetness of the leaves in the treetops or feel the harsh heat and vastness of the desert. The atmosphere coupled with the sound design and music made each level feel like their own distinct characters in and of themselves. In Great Juju Challenge, just look at it. Just look at the title screen. Dear God, this game looks terrible. Easily the worst looking game in the series. In fact, in terms of standards of the time compared to total quality, it might just be one of the worst looking games I've ever seen. Every single level in this game looks awful, from the jungle levels to the minigame backgrounds to the big G's themselves. For one thing, the game is just too damn bright. And this is noticed right on the title screen. There's a noticeable brightness throughout the game, and it looks so damn ugly, especially in the moving levels and the cheese battle with Gorgonzilla, which is detrimental because of how damn yellow everything is. The levels without the brightness look bad as well. They all look dull, lifeless, and like any sort of proper lighting and shadows. Not to mention that this game is blurry, which honestly makes it more like I'm playing a flashback sequence than the game itself. The textures in the game, like the backgrounds and the big G's, are so pixely and hard to make out, and there don't seem to be any background details for me to work out because of the damn fixed, unmovable camera. Other visual treats in this game aside from the graphics look like ass, like the title screen. Every title screen in all the Tak games had the camera panning around either the hub area or the first level of a game, which provided a nice sneak peek over what to expect. In Guardians of Gross, this title screen is atrocious. The world is chopped off, the brightness is too damn high, and it's just 3 characters walking around stiffly without a lot going for them. No interactions or talking to each other whatsoever. The loading screen was also botched with just a random background from the original games instead of the characters running in pitch darkness accompanied by a wisp, which I thought was a fun transition from one level to the next. And just look at this concept art in the loading screens. Look at Tak's face. In fact, a lot of these models don't even look like they would fit Todd Harris's original vision of the games. Tak barely even looks like himself, and he barely even comes with funny, wacky hair physics. Well, at least they kept his feather physics, so that's pretty cool, I guess. Also, why doesn't Trash Thulu look like he's made out of trash? He looks more like a leftover from the game's original elemental premise. He looks like he's made of earth and moss than garbage. The animation is atrocious. The animation as a whole is stiff, and it doesn't connect well with held objects, but I think the biggest offender are the cutscenes. They are so stilted and lifeless and lack any of the zany expressiveness of the games before. Hell, the mouth animation is terrible, and most of the time it doesn't sync up with the animation itself. The CGI cutscenes suffer as well with the same mouth problems as the in-engine cutscenes. It's also, compared to the series, very unfunny aside from its gross-out themes. It has no jokes. These cutscenes are absolutely lifeless, and they are only there to introduce characters that never show up again. Every character in this game is lifeless and have almost no charm going for them. They are only there to fit the gross-out themes. Locke appears in this game, but only in the Wii version for some reason. Even Tak has become soulless. He's the same character as he is in the show, as in not treated like a hero, and he's super annoying, like he never shuts up about anything he does. To be fair, Tak in the first game spouted a bunch of one-liners, but at least he was tolerable and had an interesting personality. Congratulations, Nick, you made the likable hero of your own game unlikable in his own show, and the game based on the show based on the game. Now take this gun and go f*** yourselves, you lousy executive goons. The music is terrible. This time, unlike the games, Guardians of Gross has 3 credited composers: Matt Black, Todd Baker, and Edward Hargrave. Matt Black I couldn't find any info on, while Todd Baker and Edward Hargrave actually work at Media Molecule on projects like Dreams and Tearaway. The last thing I loved about Tak was the music and how calming and distinct it was. It was a mix of tribal tunes and metal that added up to the game's atmosphere, and it all just screamed outdoor jungle adventure. It's also some of my favorite video game soundtracks out there. Is this the music you think of when you imagine Tak? Exactly. The soundtrack in Guardians of Gross doesn't scream outdoor jungle adventure, it screams generic jungle adventure. The music in this game is comprised of generic sounding, cartoony, and sometimes noir sounding music, and that honestly sounds like something out of Sly Cooper or Wizard 101. And I love the soundtrack of Wizard 101. I gave Great Juju Challenge flack for having the weakest soundtrack, yet this game makes Great Juju Challenge look like Metal Gear Rising by comparison. There's not one single memorable track in the entire game, and not one track that I can call my favorite. It's all bland, stock, forgettable schlock that doesn't even fit the overall tone of the games. The games were all adventurous, charming, whimsical, veering into childish territory but charming nonetheless, and all the soundtracks perfectly encapsulated that tone. This doesn't fit the series at all. There's no unique instruments, there's no mix of metal, it's all just generic cartoon jungle music, and it's all just screams generic jungle adventure. There are some decent tracks, don't get me wrong, but I'm hard pressed to remember any of them. And finally, the voice acting. The voice acting in this game is not great, honestly. They got all the voices from the show to reprise for this game, with a few new ones here and there. The most noteworthy out of all of them is Tak himself, who instead of being voiced by Jason Marsden, he's instead voiced by Hal Sparks, who voiced him in the show, and I completely forgot how much I hated his voice as a kid. My sincere apologies to Sparks, but Tak's voice is so annoying and flat out unfitting for his character. In this game, he never shuts the fuck up about anything he does. Everything he says whenever he does something is some annoying catchphrase highlighting the thing he does. I can't believe I'm saying this, but Tak, please, shut the fuck up. I love you, but you're so goddamn ear-grating. So overall, the presentation of Guardians of Gross is by far the weakest in the entire series, at least as far as I'm aware. The graphics are terrible, the brightness is too damn high, the animation is stiff and non-connecting, the writing is bland, the music is unfitting and generic, and the voice acting is annoying. Yet what makes this my Chibi Robo Ziplash is the gameplay. Tak and the Guardians of Gross is a complete makeover compared to the previous games. While it does play like a platformer, it takes on a completely different gameplay style that has more of an emphasis on parkour and minigames. One of the greatest flaws of this game are the controls. The controls in Guardians of Gross I could best describe as unwieldy. One of the things that made the Tak game so fun was their tight and lightweight controls. It had an emphasis on exploration and easy to use button pressing. In Guardians of Gross, everything feels slow and weighty and unimpactful, even by the standards of this type of platformer. The movement feels heavy, like I'm controlling a drunk person. His moves feel like they have no impact and are noticeably slower than the games prior. His jump also feels like I'm being pushed back by the Earth's gravity. I want to feel like the mighty warrior of the Pupununu, not fucking Chris Redfield. This game also has parkour, which consists of you jumping around walls, sliding across walls, flipping over enemies, which is useful in stunning them, which I have never used at all since it's pointless, and flipping over obstacles that come in your path, which also is completely pointless since you can just jump over them. The parkour platforming is just fine, to say the least, yet it feels slow and I wish it was mixed alongside traditional platforming challenges. That would have at least made the platforming tolerable. The camera in this game is fully positioned instead of freely movable like the games before it, and the camera sometimes becomes a detriment not because I can't look at the environment, but also because in certain platforming sections where I died. But I think the worst example is the fight against Gorgonzilla, where you need to hop on these platforms to reach his uvula. The levels in the game this time are all designed around the new gameplay style, with parkour challenges and you climbing the big G's a la Shadow of the Colossus, but unlike that game, these levels on the big G's are split into various acts. Tak in this game comes with his trusty, totally different staff from the cartoon show. You can hit enemies, do a charge attack, which I found really useful for how overpowered it is. When you charge it up, you can run straight at enemies and bring them down a margin. Unlike the previous games, Tak's hits in this game don't really feel free and expansive. The combat in this game is really bare bones and it lacks any depth. No combos, no Juju powers, and no power moves. All Tak can do is just swing at enemies until they die. That's it. Tak also comes with a power move that kills everything around it, yet also comes with an unskippable cutscene every time you use it. This power move also has an insanely quick recharge, and I ended up using it a lot more than I expected. You can also execute certain enemies using the circle button. The combat in this game is slow, lacking, and overall should have been done so much more. Tak also can't die in this game. Instead, getting hit lowers your power move bar. You can only die by falling off the edge, and his feather doesn't even change color when you get hit. This game also doesn't have a lot of variety when it comes to completion, aside from a score tally which equates to pretty much nothing. There's only one collectible throughout the game, the Nunu Nuggets, which unlock blocks in the extras menu that if solved, unlock concept art. I have not completed a single one of them. One thing I also liked about the Tak trilogy was its use of animals in fun and creative ways to traverse the game and solve puzzles, which I think made it stand out from other 3D platformers. Unfortunately, however, there are only two animals in this game, the parrot and the monkeys. The parrot is only used to get you from point A to point B, and your moves with it are rather limited. The monkeys are used in the same way they are to swing in Taz Wanted, to swing from point A to point B. By removing animals like rhinos, monkeys, orangutans, and squirrels, you're basically removing a key part of the game's identity and what made it separate from other platformers. The puzzles in this game are honestly hit and miss. They are mostly just piss easy, like pressing tiles and holding your Juju powers. There's only one decent puzzle in the whole game, which was on Gorgonzilla, but otherwise, these puzzles are just not fun. You know, for a game rated E10+, this game sure feels like it was made for babies. The puzzles in this game are just too basic to be counted as puzzles. They don't have any variety and they are not fun. They don't use any unique gimmicks or abilities. Actually, there are moments in the game that require you to use Juju magic, but all those just resolve in you getting a new platform to travel on. So yeah, they're not really puzzles, they're more like switches for you to switch on. This game introduces 4 new Jujus that are a lot less memorable and give Tak powers per big G each level. These range from a ground pound, which allow you to reveal new paths, slime balls, which allows you to roll into a green slime ball to roll around green paths and smash on puss holes, cheese magic, which basically allows you to activate green and blue cheese sponges, this also works on enemy armor, and dirty wind, which summons a helpful wind gust which is useful in blowing fans. All these spells are half-baked since they're only used to reveal paths from point A to point B. They don't have a lot of use in the game at all. Guardians of Gross also comes with minigames, and this is where I start to hate the game. These minigames are variations from frustrating to boring. The first is a shooting minigame where you shoot a laser at targets and a gross monster. I feel like this segment was made for the Nintendo Wii's motion controls because the aiming in this minigame feels slippery and unwieldy. Though maybe the controls in this minigame are inverted, but I can't remember. This minigame is very frustrating, especially when you have to shoot at the enemies. Then there is Sheep Toss, which is easily the worst one out of all of them. It's basically connectable with Tiki heads and sheep, and you need to throw them onto Tiki heads for points, and also the occasional bird that pops up. This minigame is frustrating because of the aim of the sheep you throw. The sheep you throw does not follow along with what your cursor is pointing at, which results in frustrating shoots at the heads you're not trying to shoot at. Not to mention that the AI in this game is better than you, shooting sheep very quickly, which I feel like it was stolen from a Super Smash Bros. Tournament, for how better it is than you. I've lost about 5 to 7 times in this minigame. It is absolutely uncontrollable dog shit that deserves to burn in a landfill. It's not frustrating because I'm bad, it's frustrating because it's bad. F this minigame with a burning passion. Also, why is Jira here? I thought she was Tak's good friend. The next minigame is where you slime enemies, but also to be careful to not slime Jabolba and Slimy. This minigame by any means isn't bad, it's just boring without anything interesting going for it. The slime board section is probably the best part of the entire game. The board controls well and it actually connects to the rails and you can change the speed up and down. The next minigame after is you throwing cheese at enemies and defend a tower. This one is also real boring, and after that is a rail grinding segment. Finally we have Skunk Roll, which is literally just the life raft roll minigame from the Madagascar game. It suffers basically the same problems as that. It's boring, and the mechanics like the bombs are pretty forgettable and I end up not using them. Also, wow, is it just me or is the AI really bad at this minigame? All these minigames can also be played in multiplayer. You fight woodies in this game, which are pretty standard run-of-the-mill enemies, and unfortunately they only come in the regular unit. No shamans or warriors. There are also these little pink bastards that are easy to kill, but your main enemies in this game are the minions of the Big Gs, comprised of about 10 units, the most out of any enemy in the series. These are trash men, trash golems, slime men, slime snails, slime golems, cheese men, cheese spinners, stink ghosts, stink nados, and stink suckers. All these enemies are really basic without much ways to take them down. The bigger enemies can be killed in a non-quick time event sequence. Trash men, slime men, cheese men, and stink ghosts are your standard hit enemies, except for the cheese men. They sometimes come with armor that can disappear with your Juju magic. Trash golems are brute enemies, slime snails will crawl around the battlefield and hit you, slime golems will charge at you, cheese spinners will spin you into the ground, stink nados also spin, and finally stink suckers require you to blow debris into their mouths and then go for the kill. All these enemies are dull and flat without a lot of tactic and fun going for them. I should mention that there are more units beyond what I just mentioned, but I'm too lazy to rewrite my script, so I'm gonna stick with what I show you. For the game's bosses, there are a couple of mini-bosses like the Big Bad Woody and these stink suckers, but there are mainly 4 bosses in the game, all of which consist of the Big G Jujus you encounter on your adventure, and these fights are pretty dull. They're really dragged out with their mechanics, and they made me wish I was doing the minigame style fights from the games prior, because at least I was having fun with those. The first boss is Trash Thulu. This fight is a horde fight where you battle waves of enemies while his eyes shoot lasers at you. You need to activate the purple crystal for his eyes to look at you, make them look at the crystal power his teeth, use those teeth as platforms, and then crank his eyes into oblivion. Repeat this twice and then it's over. Next is Slopviathan. He's one of those bosses that stands in the middle as you run around and fight it. It's a tried and true cliche in video games, which can be done excellently depending on the design, but here in Guardians of Gross, it's really boring. Slopviathan will smash his tentacles into the ground, and what you need to do is bloat them up with green slime, and then his eyes. Slopviathan will smash at you, and throw green slime on the floor to get you stuck. You can of course bypass them by rolling in your slime ball. Then we have Gorgonzilla. All you need to do is damage his big teeth while Gorgonzilla throws cheese at you. Once his teeth are damaged, he will cry and unleash a stream of platforms for you to jump on and damage his uvula. This one is easily the worst out of all of them because the shitty platform is affected by the damn brightness. Finally, we have Stinkolossus. He's another runaround boss, much like Slopviathan, except his arena is much larger and he will occasionally spit out purple balls that you need to blow back at him. But in order to get his attention, you have to take out 3 stink suckers. And this is the final actual boss, by the way. The last level is just a chase in the Jade Runner, which I'll go over later. So overall, Taken the Guardians of Gross is not a good game. The movements are clunky, the combat is clunky, the platforming is boring, the aiming is ass, the minigames are boring and frustrating, and overall, I think I can definitely thank myself for not playing this game as a kid. Let's end this madness by drinking up the finale. So finally, after taking down all the big Gs and taking their crystals, Tak returns to the temple and places them back together and attempts to put away the big Gs, but then he trips and they return again. Stinky Juju comes in and says the only way to get rid of the big Gs is to drink down all their samples and burp them out of existence. So Tak decides to take the J Runners to the village and banish the big Gs. So Taken the Guardians of Gross doesn't really have a final boss. Stinkolossus was the last real boss, but the final level regardless is a chase back to the Pupanunu village in the J-Runner, and this is another one of the worst parts of the game. You need to drive the J-Runner all while avoiding obstacles, the attacks of the big Gs, and these crystals that reward you time. The J-Runner itself has really slippery controls that make this minigame a lot more frustrating, especially when I'm collecting these Nunu nuggets and the pink crystals. This vehicle is just too damn fast, which you can slow it down, yes, but even then, that doesn't excuse the shitty controls. This minigame sucks, plain and simple. So once Tak reaches the village, he drinks the Big G mixture and belches the big bastards out of existence. Everyone cheers for him and the game ends on a freeze frame, and then we get a view of his junk. The end. If you collect all the Nunu nuggets in the game, you can unlock puzzles in the extras that showcase concept art. Like I said, I couldn't figure out one and I didn't collect all the nugs, so I'll just leave it here for you. Other than that though, what you can view in the extras include your awards, cheat codes, a trailer for a DVD of the show, and even a full episode of the show, which I had the full displeasure of viewing. If Tak 2 The Staff of Dreams is the Shrek 2 of the series, Great Juju Challenge is the Galaxy 2 of the series, then Guardians of Gross is the Plains of the series, as in an entry that was made by an entirely different team that nobody talks about. So yeah, Plains. Tak and the Guardians of Gross just might be one of the worst games I've had the displeasure of reviewing on this channel so far, and that's kinda saying a lot considering its competition. This game is bad with its ugly graphics, unmemorable music, boring levels, boring combat, frustrating minigames, clunky controls, and overall it's a game that I'm glad I never fully played as a kid. So what happened afterwards? After this game was released, the Tak and the Power of Juju series was officially dead. The last appearance of Tak in a video game was Nicktoons Globs of Doom on October 20th, 2008, and the last episode of the show aired on November 29th, 2008, ending after one season. And ever since then, Tak himself has become nothing more but a distant memory, alongside other THQ mascots like Crypto, the Horseman from Darksiders, and the Blob. Funny thing too, two of these franchises ended in a quadrilogy, with either one or two games that nobody talks about. Although Crypto now is less of a distant memory and more like a comeback from the grave, well, with a second remake coming out soon. I don't blame this game for the death of the series, but I can blame it for at least amplifying it. The show was the real nail in the coffin that left a bad taste in everyone's mouths. Right now, the Tak and the Power of Juju series still remains dormant, and all I can do is hope for a remake of the trilogy without any reek of the show's taintfulness. Or hell, if the potential remake is successful, I would be down for a definitive fourth Tak game with the scrapped elements of Guardians of Gross, including a playable Tlaylock. But right now, at the end of the day, we are just left with Guardians of Gross. My odyssey to review the Tak series, however, is far from over, as I still have to review the ports and the show itself. But now, I'll leave it here and rate Tak and the Guardians of Gross a trash can out of a rhino. Or in other words, a 3 out of 10. What a bootlegged piece of shit. I just want to say again thank you all so much for 500 subscribers on this YouTube channel. It's always fun yet challenging to make these videos for you guys, and I hope you enjoy them very much. I also want to apologize for my Banjo-Kazooie video, not because of my opinion on the game. I still think the game itself sucks, but what I really want to apologize for is my rant at the end attacking YouTubers. I'm sorry for attacking those that like the game because of nostalgia. Even I'll admit I'm biased with my nostalgia when making these reviews sometimes. You're allowed to like Banjo-Kazooie because of nostalgia, and you're allowed to like the YouTubers that play the game. Even I'll admit I went a little too harsh at the end. I'm sorry, and I won't do it again. I hope y'all understand. Have a nice day, and remember, I'm always reading the comments.